Local validity as a key to sanity and civilization, Part 4. V. The game-theoretic function of law can make following those simple rules feel like losing something, taking a step backward. You don't get to defect in the prisoner's dilemma, you don't get that delicious 5-0 payoff instead of 3-3. The law may punish one of your allies. You may be losing something according to your actual value function, which feels like the law having an objectively bad immoral result. You may coherently hold that the universe is a worse place for an instance of the enforcement of a good law, relative to its counterfactual state if that law could be lifted in just that instance without affecting any other instances. Though this does require seeing that law as having a game-theoretic function as well as a moral function. So long as the rules are seen as moving from a bad global equilibrium to a global equilibrium seen as better, and so long as the rules are mostly equally enforced on everyone, people are sometimes able to take a step backward and see that larger picture. Or, in a less abstract way, trade off the reified interest of the law against their own desires and wishes. This mental motion goes by names like justice, fairness, and impartiality. It has ancient exemplars like a story I couldn't seem to Google, about a Chinese general who prohibited his troops from looting, and then his son appropriated a straw hat from a peasant, so the general sentenced his own son to death with tears running down his eyes. Here's a fragment of thought as it was before the Great Stagnation, as depicted in passing in H. Beam Piper's Little Fuzzy, one of the earliest books I read as a child. It's from 1962, when the mimetic collapse had started but not spread very far into science fiction. It stuck in my mind long ago and became one more tiny little piece of who I am now. Pendarvis is going to try the case himself, Emmert said. I always thought he was a reasonable man, but what's he trying to do now? Cut the company's throat? He isn't anti-company. He isn't pro-company either. He's just pro-law. The law says that a planet with native sapient inhabitants is a Class 4 planet, and has to have a Class 4 colonial government. If Zarathustra is a Class 4 planet, he wants it established, and the proper laws applied. If it's a Class 4 planet, the Zarathustra company is illegally chartered. It's his job to put a stop to illegality. Frederick Pendarvis' religion is the law, and he is its priest. You never get anywhere by arguing religion with a priest. There is no suggestion in 1962 that the speakers are gullible, or that Pendarvis is a naïve, or that Pendarvis is weird for thinking like this. Pendarvis isn't the defiant hero or even much of a side character. It's just a kind of judge you sometimes run into, part of a normal environment as projected from the author's mind that wrote the story. If you don't have some people like Pendarvis, and you don't appreciate what they're trying to do even when they rule against you, sooner or later your tribe ends. I doubt the United States will literally fall into anarchy this way before the Aji timeline runs out. But the concept applies on a smaller scale than countries. It applies on a smaller scale than communities, to bargains between three people or two. The notion that you can be fair to one side but not the other, that what's called fairness is a kind of favor you do for people you like, says that even the instinctive sense people had of law as game theory is being lost in the modern mimetic collapse. People are being exposed to so many social media viral depictions of the other side defecting, and viewpoints exclusively from our side without any leavening of any other viewpoint that might ask for a game-theoretic compromise, that they're losing the ability to appreciate the kind of anecdotes they used to tell in ancient China. Or maybe it's hormone-like chemicals leached from plastic food containers. Let's not forget all the psychological explanations offered for a wave of violence that turned out to be lead poisoning. And to take the point full circle. The mental motion to even-handedly apply the rules irrespective of their conclusion is a kind of thinking that human beings appreciate intuitively, or at least they appreciated it in ancient China and mid-20th century science fiction. In fact, we appreciate the law more natively than we appreciate the notion of local syntactic rules capturing semantically valid steps in mathematical proofs, go figure. So the legal metaphor is where a lot of people get started on epistemology, by seeing the local rules of valid argument as the law, fallacies as crimes. The unusually healthy of mind will reject bad allied arguments with an emotional sense of practicing the way of an impartial judge. It's ironic, in a way, because there is no game theory and no morality to the true way of the map that reflects the territory. A paperclip maximizer would also strive to debias its cognitive processes, alone in its sterile universe. But I would venture a guess and hypothesis that you are better off buying a used car from a random mathematician than a random non-mathematician, even after controlling for IQ. The reasoning being that mathematicians are people whose sense of law was strong enough to be appropriated for proofs, and that this will correlate, if imperfectly, with mathematicians abiding by what they see as the law in other places as well. I could be wrong, and would be interested in seeing the results of any study like this if it were ever done. But no studies on self-reports of criminal behavior, please. Unless there's some reason to believe that the self-report metric isn't measuring honesty times criminality rather than criminality. I have no grand agenda in having said all this. I've just sometimes thought of late that it would be nice if more of the extremely basic rules of thinking were written down.